Have you ever been pushed to your limit by someone who underestimated you? What did you do? Or wish you had done? Tell me your story. Share your truth. Because sometimes, the moment we stop whispering is the moment we start changing everything. I stared at the payroll portal like it had personally slapped me. My salary had dropped by 27%. No explanation, no warning, just gone. And when I asked about it, my new boss smiled like it was funny. "If it's not working for you," he said, "you're always free to leave." That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. For 12 years, I had given this company everything: weekends, holidays, late nights that bled into mornings. I wasn't just a name on a payroll sheet. I was the steady hand behind 3 of our largest client renewals, the one they called when things went sideways. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I got things done. And for the most part, that had always been enough. Until we got a new CEO. He walked in with shiny shoes, buzzwords, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Within 3 weeks, he had cleaned house, senior people gone, new hires brought in straight from his old firm, and a wave of restructured roles that mostly meant do more for less. I didn't panic. Not at first. I believed in my work. I believed that if I kept my head down, did my job better than anyone else, I'd be safe. Then came the email. Payroll adjustment, effective this cycle. That's all the subject line said. When I opened the attached breakdown, my chest physically tightened. I thought it had to be an error. A 27% salary cut? Without discussion? Without documentation? I took the elevator up to his office, heart pounding, fingers clenched around the printout. I waited outside his glass door, watching him laugh at something on his phone while sipping a $6 latte I'd seen the intern fetch for him. He waved me in like I was interrupting a massage. I showed him the document. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. "This is part of a broader streamlining initiative," he said. "I'm sure you understand. Leaner, smarter, agile. The market's changing." I tried to respond professionally, asked if my performance had fallen short, if there had been complaints I wasn't made aware of. He shrugged. "You're competent, Ellis," he said, "but the company's evolving. If this isn't a fit anymore, you don't need to force it. People move on." That moment changed something in me. It wasn't just the pay cut. It was the way he looked at me while delivering it, like I was disposable, like I was some relic from a slower, less valuable past. He was trying to push me out, clean and cheap. No severance, no scene, just enough pressure that I'd eventually walk away. But I didn't walk. I walked back to my desk, opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, and pulled out an old black fountain pen. My father's. He died the year after being pushed out of his own job. After 30 years of loyal service, they downsized him a week before retirement. That pen had been his goodbye gift. I'd kept it as a reminder. I turned it slowly in my fingers, then whispered to myself, "Not this time. Not this woman. Not this story. Not this ending." And so, I began. Quietly. Carefully. The plan wasn't revenge. Not yet. First, it was survival. Then, it would become something else entirely. For the first time in my career, I dreaded coming to work. Everything about my role began to quietly decay. It started with small things. Meetings I was no longer invited to, decision memos sent around without my name copied, client updates that bypassed me entirely. My email inbox, once flooded with requests, was suspiciously quiet. People I had mentored for years now avoided my gaze in the hallway, offering only tight, uncomfortable smiles. They were distancing themselves. I didn't blame them. Fear spreads fast when leadership makes an example of someone, and that's exactly what this was. I wasn't being restructured, I was being erased. One Friday afternoon, I was asked to move desks. My nameplate disappeared overnight from the glass-walled corner I'd earned over a decade of performance reviews and sleepless deadlines. My new seat, wedged between two interns next to the copier, under a flickering light no one ever bothered to fix. The message was clear. You're not welcome here, but we won't fire you. You'll do it yourself. Still, I didn't leave. I clung to routine, arriving 10 minutes early, answering every email, double-checking every client file, not because I thought it would win them over, but because I needed to remind myself that I still had control over something. Until the final blow came, I was asked to train someone, a new strategic consultant brought in to modernize client operations. His name was Mason, mid-30s, overconfident, underqualified, and openly dismissive of me. During our first session, he said, "Let's keep this high level, Ellis. I don't need the old school stuff." He was replacing me, and they expected me to help him do it. I nearly walked out that day. I went to the rooftop during lunch, something I rarely did. The sky was gray, and the wind was sharp against my skin. I held my father's fountain pen in my hand, gripping it so tightly it left an imprint across my palm. A memory came flooding back. The night Dad came home after losing his job. He hadn't cried. He'd just stared at the dinner table, untouched food in front of him, and whispered, "I gave them everything." That night, I swore to myself, no one would ever take that much from me and walk away clean. I went back inside, sat down, and opened the spreadsheet Mason had emailed me. Then I quietly opened a second tab, one the company's IT department wouldn't track. I started researching whistleblower protections, labor laws, and internal financial protocols. Something didn't feel right about how they were handling vendor contracts lately. My name had shown up on one or two I didn't remember signing. A quiet knock at my desk startled me. It was Ava from accounting. She'd been hired a year ago, soft-spoken, always polite. She looked over her shoulder, then slid me a sticky note. 4 words, no punctuation. Check vendor invoice 1186. And just like that, the wind changed. I thanked her quietly, pretending it was a casual conversation about lunch options, but my mind was already racing. Invoice 1186. That's where it began. The shift, the unraveling. I waited until the office lights thinned out and the chatter of Friday happy hour filled the corridors. Then I pulled up invoice 1186. At first glance, it looked harmless. Just another vendor payment for consulting services tied to a client I'd supported months ago. The vendor's name was unfamiliar. Dymark Solutions. Generic, forgettable. But what caught my eye was the sign-off line. My name. Ellis Rowe. Authorized, digital signature on file. Only, I never signed it. I pulled up the company's internal vendor approval log. My credentials were listed as the reviewer. Time-stamped, cleared. Except during that week, I had been out sick with strep throat. There was no way I had even touched that file. My stomach dropped. I searched Dymark Solutions in our internal vendor database. There were 3 other invoices, all cleared in the last 6 months. All linked to projects I had either led or been recently removed from. The total, nearly $87,000 in external consulting fees. I leaned back in my chair, fingers frozen over the keyboard. I'd been used. My name, my credibility, my track record. They hadn't just tried to push me out. They were laundering money through my identity, banking on the reputation I'd spent over a decade building. If anything went wrong, I'd be the fall girl, not the CEO, not his golden boy Mason, me. The shock gave way to something colder, heavier. Rage, but not the explosive kind. The slow, calculated kind. The kind that studies a chessboard and starts moving pawns. I copied everything, every invoice, every access log, every email header. I backed them up twice, one on a hidden flash drive tucked behind my photo frame, and one in a secure cloud account I hadn't used since graduate school. Then I started asking questions. Quiet ones. I approached Ava the following Monday with 2 coffees and gratitude folded in between. She didn't say much, but her eyes said everything. She knew something wasn't right. She'd seen my name pop up repeatedly in vendor payments that raised internal flags, but every time she flagged them, The requests were overridden. By Mason, I wasn't just being erased, I was being framed. That week, I met with an employment attorney, one who specialized in whistleblower protection. I gave her everything I had. She took one look at the Dymark trail and said, "They're laundering funds under your profile. That's not just unethical, that's criminal." She instructed me not to confront anyone directly, not yet. "Let them think you're still playing their game," she said. "The more they believe you're beaten, the more careless they'll get." So I smiled in meetings, trained Mason like I cared, gave polite updates to the CEO during drive-by check-ins. All the while, I dug deeper. I found 2 more ghost vendors. Both traced back to Mason's personal connections, old college roommates, one of whom had no digital footprint other than a one-page website hosted on a free server. But the final confirmation came in a single damning email, accidentally forwarded to me by Mason, who clearly thought he was sending it to someone else. Subject: covering our tracks. Body: just make sure Ellis doesn't get wind of the Dymark numbers. We'll push her out before audit season. She's emotional. She'll walk. Keep it smooth. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in my ears. They didn't just underestimate me. They assumed I was too tired, too beaten, too small to matter. They were wrong. I printed the email. Then I printed everything. A full report. Tabbed, cross-referenced, time-stamped. I included an appendix of every file tied to my name with discrepancies, along with IT logs showing login anomalies. And I made 5 copies, one for my attorney, one for the board of directors, one for our compliance department, one for myself, and one for insurance, because I had a feeling things were about to get ugly. But before I triggered anything formal, I needed one last thing: leverage. So I reached out to one of our biggest clients, Ravel Technologies, under the pretense of a routine update. I'd managed their account for years. They trusted me. Over lunch, I asked casually if the case ever worked with a firm called Dymark Solutions. They frowned. "No, never heard of them. Why?" I smiled and shook my head. "Just reviewing some back-end files. Probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing, it was the crack in the dam. Later that day, I got a voicemail from Ravel's COO. "Ellis, that name you mentioned? We found something weird on one of the expense statements. If there's anything we need to know, we'd appreciate a heads up. We value our relationship with you, more than you might realize." That was it. The moment I knew I wasn't alone. The moment I realized they'd tried to bury me under my own reputation. But I was about to flip the entire foundation beneath them. The morning of the meeting, I woke up before my alarm. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't afraid. I was still. That kind of stillness only comes after you've walked through the fire and realized it can't burn you anymore. I wore gray. Not black, not a statement, just steel. I walked into the building at 7:48 a.m. Everyone else was still arriving, half awake, balancing coffees and phones. Mason didn't look up when I passed him. He wouldn't know until it was too late. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. By 8:58, I was already seated inside the glass conference room, a slim black folder in front of me. I didn't bring my laptop. I wouldn't need it. One by one, they filed in. CFO, Head of Compliance, Legal Counsel, 2 board members on video call. The CEO walked in last, smirking like he'd just been handed the daily crossword puzzle instead of a grenade. He took the chair across from me. "Ellis," he said smoothly, "we weren't expecting a formal session today." "I know," I replied, "but after the latest vendor filings, I thought we should clarify a few things." I opened the folder, turned it around, and slid it across the table. Silence. They read the first page, then the second. A few eyes widened. One of the board members on Zoom leaned in and said, "Can you scroll down on your end? I want to see the audit trail on page 6. I kept my voice low, steady. "The documents in front of you include fraudulent invoices tied to vendors never approved through our standard process, using my digital signature without consent. You'll also find email evidence that internal actors knowingly bypassed compliance protocols and used my reputation as cover, it says, then added, had I not caught this, your upcoming audit would have flagged me as the responsible party. I assume that was the plan. The CEO opened his mouth, but the head of legal raised a hand. Don't speak. He turned to me. Have you shared this outside the company? I've submitted the entire packet to my attorney. I've also been in touch with one of our major clients who noticed discrepancies tied to these same vendors. The CFO cursed under his breath. The energy in the room flipped, just like that. I wasn't the problem anymore. I was the liability they failed to anticipate. One of the board members, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice like flint, spoke next. How long have you known? I looked at her directly. Since invoice 1186? She nodded. No follow-up needed. Legal counsel stood. This meeting is adjourned. We'll conduct an immediate internal review. Ellis, you're advised not to speak with press or external parties until contacted. I nodded. Understood. I closed the folder, slipped my father's fountain pen into my blazer pocket, and walked out. As I passed Mason's desk, he looked up, confused by the sudden flurry of emails on his screen. He wouldn't be confused for long. By the time I returned to my desk, the news had already begun to spread. Slack channels went quiet. Office doors that were usually cracked open were suddenly shut. HR huddled in the break room. Something had shifted in the atmosphere, subtle, electric, the kind of tension that comes before a thunderclap. I didn't make a scene. I didn't gloat. I powered through emails like it was any other Tuesday. But in my inbox sat one message that changed everything. Subject, meeting request, urgent, from board executive assistant to Ellis Rowe. Body, the board chair would like to speak with you privately this afternoon. Please confirm availability. I confirmed. Then I sat very, very still. The call came at 4 o'clock. The board chair, let's call him Raymond, was concise. Ellis, what you presented this morning was both impressive and disturbing. We've opened a formal investigation. In the meantime, the CEO has been placed on administrative leave. Mason, too, effective immediately. I closed my eyes for just a second. Not in relief, just confirmation. A weight shifting. Raymond continued, we recognize this has put you in an extremely difficult position. I'd like to know what you want, Ellis. From us. It was the first time anyone in power had asked me that. Not what I could give, not how much more I could tolerate, but what I wanted. And I had my answer. I want my name cleared, I said. I want full transparency in the investigation. And I want a formal acknowledgement that this company used my name in fraudulent filings without consent. There was a pause. Then, done. But I wasn't finished. I also want you to understand something, I added. This didn't happen because of one unethical man. It happened because the culture here made room for him, rewarded him, protected him, and tried to erase people like me the moment we stopped being convenient. Raymond didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't. Understood, he said quietly. And Ellis, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. It wasn't worth much, but it was something. 2 days later, the company issued an internal memo. The CEO's departure was effective immediately due to personal matters. Mason's profile vanished from the internal directory. Compliance launched a full audit of every vendor contract from the last 2 years. HR circulated a new whistleblower protocol, and my inbox, empty just a week earlier, was now flooded with messages from junior analysts, from team leads, from people I barely knew. Thank you. I wish I'd spoken up sooner. You have no idea what this meant to us. But the most unexpected message came from Revell Technologies, the client I had quietly warned. Ellis, we were beyond impressed with your professionalism and integrity. If you ever consider a move, we'd love to speak with you. I stared at that email for a long time. I wasn't planning to leave immediately. Not yet. Not before I saw the full fallout play out. But the idea planted a seed. A week later, I was asked to return to the executive floor. Not as an employee under review, as an advisor. They wanted me to help rebuild trust with our clients, to act as a consultant in reshaping our internal processes. It was a flattering offer, but I declined, politely, firmly. They tried to replace me, and now, without me, they were struggling to hold the foundation together. I didn't need their titles, I didn't need their apologies. I had reclaimed something far more powerful, my voice. On my final day, I walked past the glass office where the CEO used to sit. It was empty now, a reminder. I paused by the window, watching as a new group of fresh-faced hires entered orientation. I wondered if they'd be treated differently, if they'd know who paved the way for their protection. Probably not. But maybe that's what real change looks like. Quiet, uncredited, unshakable. Before I left, I packed the last item from my desk, my father's fountain pen. I clicked it open, wrote one sentence on a sticky note, left it under the nameplate they hadn't yet removed. Don't confuse silence with surrender. Then I walked out the door, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as someone who had rewritten the ending they tried to write for her. I didn't throw a goodbye party. No last-minute potluck. No obligatory sheet cake. No email saying, "Wishing you all the best." I logged out, dropped my badge into a plain envelope, and left it on my desk like a forgotten memo. But I didn't leave in silence. Every step I took through that building echoed with the weight of things I refused to carry anymore. Guilt that wasn't mine, loyalty that wasn't mutual, and fear that had lived in my spine for far too long. As I stepped into the elevator for the last time, I looked up at the security camera in the corner. For a brief second, I almost smiled. Let them watch me walk out whole. The HR director passed me in the lobby, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She gave me a nod, measured, subdued. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd known for a while and chosen silence like so many others. Or maybe she just admired the fact that I didn't scream on my way out. Outside, the wind cut across my face like it had weeks ago on the rooftop, when I was still trying to decide whether to fight or fold. Only this time, it didn't sting. It cleared. I got into my car and drove exactly 4 blocks. Revell Technologies. The glass doors slid open before me like an answer I'd earned, not begged for. Inside, it smelled like new beginnings, polished wood, fresh coffee, quiet purpose. They hadn't just offered me a job. They had watched how I handled the storm. They saw the restraint in my power and the truth in my silence, and they respected it. By the end of that week, I had officially signed as senior advisor to client strategy. My first act? Rebuilding a trust-first communication framework for companies on the edge of collapse, the kind of thing I wish someone had done for the place I'd just left. I wasn't running away. I was walking into something built on alignment, not survival. 2 weeks later, the headlines began to surface. The audit had concluded. The former CEO was under federal review for financial misconduct. Mason's name was tied to multiple shell vendors now under criminal investigation. Their LinkedIn profiles disappeared. Their digital footprints shrank. Mine, on the other hand, expanded. I didn't grant interviews. I didn't go viral. But messages trickled in, quiet, raw, honest. Ellis, you don't know me, but your story gave me the courage to file my report. I've been sitting on evidence for months. You made me feel less alone. Thank you for reminding me we're not powerless. That's when it hit me. This had never really been about revenge. That was just the first door. Beyond it was something quieter, stronger, more enduring. Legacy. I hadn't burned their bridges. I'd lit a path. And someone, somewhere, was walking it now. Just a little taller, just a little braver, because they saw someone else do it first. Some victories don't come with confetti. They come in silence. In the mornings, you wake up and no longer feel dread in your chest. In the moments, you sit in a meeting and realize no one's trying to talk over you. In the clarity of knowing that your worth is no longer negotiable. That's what freedom felt like. Not loud, but full. Sometimes, when I pass my old building, I glance up at the seventh floor. The lights are always on. New faces sit behind desks that once carried the weight of my unpaid overtime, my late-night strategy decks, my forgotten birthdays. I don't feel bitterness, just distance and peace. There's a kind of closure that doesn't need applause, just the quiet certainty that you told the truth and you were heard. And maybe that's what scared them the most, that I didn't fight with fists or emails in all caps. I fought with preparation, with patience, with evidence, and when the time came, I didn't demand respect. I proved they should have given it to me all along. There are thousands of people like me, sitting quietly at their desks, shrinking a little more each day under the weight of unfairness they've been told to accept. If you're one of them, I want you to know this. Silence can be a strategy, but it should never become your prison. Which part of Ellis's story resonated with you the most? Was it when she quietly gathered the evidence? When she walked into the boardroom with unshakable calm? Or that final moment when she left on her own terms, free and respected? Leave a comment and let me know. I read every single one. And who knows, your experience might just inspire the next story.